Hello, and welcome to Talking Justice with Lex. As a future lawyer, I started this podcast to speak on criminal justice issues that I found most prevalent in our society today. After taking a restorative justice class this spring, I was opened to a whole new perspective on things the criminal justice system has in common with societal practices and ways to fix them. This episode will be about comparing solitary confinement protocol in prisons with how students in schools are sent to ISAP or out-of-school suspension. Solitary confinement is defined under the restrictive housing policy in criminal justice as a practice of total isolation as a form of punishment, protective custody, and suicide watch. They are used, according to Smith, and towards an understanding of what works in segregation, implementing correctional programming and reentry focused services in restrictive housing units, such as housing units have been used since the inception of the prison to isolate inmates from the general population of offenders for both punitive, which are disciplinary reasons, and administrative, which are safety purposes. To punish deviants, we remove an item of value from the inmate. We do this in hopes that inmates will want what was taken from them and, in their quest to regain it, learn to follow the rules and regulations of the institution. So in this case, the prison. Inmates who fail to follow the rules may lose recreational privileges, contact visits, communication time, or television, and other things. The inmate is already accustomed to what he has, or she, so they do not take this lightly. Those in the system see solitary confinement as correcting behavior, but others see it as punishment for those outside the system. Correctional staff uses solitary confinement to transition problematic inmates back into the general population while still maintaining safety and a sense of security. To address some of the racial disparities within this issue, solitary confinement is big on the discretion of the correctional officer when it comes to deciding who gets longer sentences or what actions deserve punishment. On a national level, an individual's race is a significant factor in restrictive housing. According to a 2015 survey, Black men overrepresent the solitary confinement population, which, like everything in our world, happens, sadly. While Black men represent 40% of the prison's population, they made up 45% of solitary confinement in the study. Statewide, the numbers are a little bit more balanced. In Kentucky, where I'm from, 28% of Black male population compared to 27 solitary confinement, alongside with the white male prison and restrictive housing population is 70. ISAP is short for In-School Adjustment Program, which is an in-school removal method for discipline. Students are removed from school and placed in an alternative location within the school away from other students. Some behavioral issues that can result in ISAP are horseplay, non-attendance of class, leaving the school grounds, or using profane language. These are considered level 2 offenses in the school districts according to the JCPS handbook. Out-of-school suspensions are where students are not permitted to come to school for a full or partial day. The length of suspension is determined by the principal based on the behavior codes laid out in the school handbook. Some of those behavior issues are fighting, harassment, possession of drugs or alcohol, among others. These behavioral infractions are considered level 3 in the handbook. In the school system, it's not a known trait that minority students are disciplined at higher rates than others. These harsher punishments can influence these students' perceptions of school for the rest of their lives. In the study published in the American Psychologist Journal, it was found that 26% of the Black students received at least one suspension for a minor infraction over the course of 3 years, compared with just 2% of white students. The study also saw that the amount of kids that were being disciplined, their grades suffered significantly. If you think about it, if you're pulling kids out of school for these types of disciplinary actions, then their grades will fall as well. As you can see, the principle of solitary confinement is embedded in many aspects of our society. If you think about it, it's even embedded in how we punish our kids growing up by using things like timeout or grounding them. Personally, my mom loved grounding me. I wouldn't have my phone, I couldn't hang out with my friends, which honestly isn't that much different than solitary confinement. Looking at this phenomenon through a restorative justice lens, I think about a movie I watched in my spring course titled Push Out. This movie was about how certain schools and organizations have changed their handbooks to a more progressive form of discipline for their students. Instead of sending kids off to detention for bad behavior, they had cool-down rooms where the students could listen to music, draw, or write, anything that they could do to center themselves so they could return back to class. These schools and programs put more of an emphasis on understanding why the kids are acting out instead of assuming it's just bad behavior. This is what the restorative lens exemplifies, as well as fixing conflicts with more conflict management skills and less punitive forms of discipline that can have a huge racial disparity to them. Now that we have talked about the boring and tedious definitions of everything, as well as my suggestion of restorative practices for the issue, let's hear from Ms. Shannon Kamek, a manager at Seven Counties Crisis Unit who works with kids who have mental health or behavioral issues, and who's also, of course, my brilliant mom. So, Ms. Kamek, why do kids come to you, and how do you go about helping them with their issues?
Well, students usually come to me voluntarily. It's usually their parent who is saying that they might do well with us. They usually stay in the unit for about 7 days, and they get one-on-one help from our therapists and psychiatrists to see what's really up. The managers on the unit also help with their problem-solving skills and just see how we can help them.
So, listening to what I've said about solitary confinement and ISAP and out-of-school suspension, along with the restorative practices, how do you believe your job aligns with the outline and focus of restorative justice?
Well, we help kids learn the difference of their actions and how they can solve problems better. We also help treat the cause of their issues so that so in group therapy, it'll be better with their families, and they start to feel heard and work through their issues better instead of isolating them. We allow them to figure out why they're acting this way.
Yes. Thank you so much for your input on the situation.
Thank you, Alexis.
And for being my guest and taking the time to be here. I personally believe fundamental changes in teacher training and school discipline policies is a huge way to fix the harms of ISAP and out-of-school suspension. If we can train our teachers in a restorative manner, there will be less kids sent to ISAP and suspension and more kids learning about problem-solving skills that will essentially help them in the future. With all of these things in motion, finding the root cause of the student's behavior should be the key in the process, because if educators know the cause, then they can help fix that cause. Which be followed by reduction in the numbers that kids are being sent out of school and potentially in jail. Turning this to a criminal justice perspective, I believe that restorative justice practices instead of solitary confinement can also bring about some of the same outcomes as the school system. Instead of locking a person away by themselves and causing potential mental health harm, we should be teaching the inmates the wrong of their actions and helping them find better ways to deal with conflict in the future, which will not only help them during their time inside and increase safety for the prison system, but also for their life after incarceration, which is what restorative justice is all about. So thank you all for taking the time to listen to Talking Justice with Lex. I will leave you with trying to figure out your own way to help the community and how you think these two systems could potentially help each other out in reducing the amount of people in jail, grades being dropped, and just the prison population in general. Thanks.